Hi, everybody. I'm not sure if this thing is on. Is it on? Can you hear? No, it is. Thank you. Hi. Okay, sorry to interrupt the wonderful conversation that everybody's having right now, but we do need to get started, otherwise you're not gonna get food. So I would suggest you guys, it's free seating, seat wherever. I'm trying to get the speakers to sit on this table here on one, but sit wherever. And let's... Hopefully my voice will resist. You just talk. Okay, Martin's there. Hey, is Tanya here? Have you seen Tanya? We met.
It was not.
Have an interesting night. Okay. Okay. Hi. All right. Technically, we're trying to have them. That's all right.
You're all right, everyone. Yeah, this is for the speakers. So. You come. Yeah, find a spot. Find a spot.
Try to have the speakers of the panel here, but I mean...
It's okay, I can, but I think it'll be good. You'll start to get a little bit of a flavor.
You want me to find your friend?
So you want to keep this in?
If you want to sit there, she was not going to make it until like literally when she has to speak, so...
Our advisor for EAT.
I have the impression I've already met you. Awesome. Maybe at the forum? Yeah, we were at no, I wasn't. All right, everyone. If we can wrap up the conversation so we can get started. All right, everyone, we need to start moving. Otherwise, as Patricia said, we're not going to be able to eat. So first of all, welcome to everybody. There's lots of active conversations, which is great. Before we get started, I wanted to just land a little bit. With the activity in Davos, it's really difficult to find presence. So the first thing I want to do is just take a couple of breaths together to land in this place, in this beautiful room, in this beautiful venue. So let's take a deep breath in. And a big sigh. One more time. And last one. So I'm going to start by saying that this is uncommon for me. I'm extremely nervous, but I just wanted to lay that out there in the beginning. The next thing I want to do is to thank our sponsors, thank the wonderful team at Intent for giving us this space and for hosting this dinner and giving us food. And finally, I want to thank all of you for being here, because the most valuable resource we have in this day and age is our time. And taking the time to be here to talk about this important conversation, we're really grateful for that. So why are we here? We're talking about bridging the nature of finance gap. But I first want to share why I'm here. So I work in nature. I've worked in nature for my whole career, over 20 years. But the reason I'm here and the reason I do this work is because, as I often say, I'm a family person first. I'm a father beyond all else. And then I happen to be a founder and work in nature and sustainability. But I do this because it's important for my family. This is a generational issue that we're trying to solve for. And we know that nature underpins everything. Most importantly, it underpins our existence on this planet. Yet, we take it for granted. Even those of us that work on the front lines of nature don't value it appropriately. Nature is foundational and core infrastructure for everything that we do, ourselves and our economy. But because we take it for granted, that's why we created something called the Gnat. And the Gnat is nature's publicist, because nature is underappreciated, undervalued. It is core, it is important, but it needs a publicist. So we created the Gnat to be nature's publicist. At the same time as this dinner, we have another dinner down at Goal's house, which is really around the cultural piece of what the Gnat is. And the Gnat, Patricia is going to tell us more about the origin story of the Gnat and what it represents. But it's two components. One is to raise more awareness around the critical infrastructure that nature represents, and that's through attaching nature to culture. So bringing the issue to the world at scale, with celebrity, with influence, with events. We had our inaugural event a few months ago in New York, on the eve of Climate Week in New York, the Nat Gala. So taking a page from the Met, and the Met Gala that happens every spring to support the fashion industry, or the Fashion Institute, we thought, why can't we have a similar moment, an annual moment every year, for the most foundational infrastructure that we have, which is nature. But culture alone is not going to solve for the financing gap. So the reason we're having this dinner is to talk about solutions at scale, so we can accelerate progress towards the nature funding gap. So I'm going to turn to Patricia to talk a little bit about the evolution, where we are today, and how the evening is going to unfold.
Thank you so much, Hari. There's still seats on these tables if you want a seat over here. And for those of you who are standing, if you want a glass of wine, come and sit. I know that it feels really cozy here, but we really need you seated so you can actually be served. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Patricia Zurrita. I'm the Chief Partnerships Officer of Conservation International. I'm Ecuadorian. I come from the Amazon. I cut my teeth in conservation in the Amazon forest of Ecuador. working with the Ministry of Environment first, and then I decided that I needed to study economics if we really wanted to save the planet. Because unless we actually value nature, and those of us who are tree huggers value nature just for its intrinsic value, but most of the world is not really a tree hugger like I am. So I went and did economics, and I have worked with Conservation International for almost 15 years now, but in the middle of that, I led BirdLife International for 9 years. About 3 years ago, I came back to the States. Silly me, honestly. To rejoin CI because I really wanted an organization as capable and as innovative and as daring at CI to keep pushing the envelope and finding solutions that can help us fund and support, conserve, and restore nature. So I was the Chief Strategy Officer until April last year, and now I'm leading partnerships. And in that process, I had the incredible luck of meeting Gail at Gold's House, Gail Galley, and Jay Lipman from Ethic. I had been leading a process in CI to start reversing the subsidies that are destroying nature and get them to become incentives for doing nature conservation and restoration. And so we hosted a dinner, much smaller than this, at Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, in the UAE, when the COP was happening to talk about subsidy reform. And Gail and Jay stayed until the end and said, Patricia, the financing gap of nature, $700 billion at that point, was like, that's less than 2% of the asset management of the planet. Why are we not saving nature? Why are we not financing nature? And I was like, buddies, come and join me. Let's do something about this because we're not being able to make it happen. And Nature 2 started as a movement. And as Hari said, Nature 2 gave birth to the NAT, that is the publicist of nature. And we are pushing for something that we're calling NATCO to really accelerate the financing of nature as quickly as possible because we know that we don't have time. As Hari said, he's a family guy. I'm a mother of twins. I know, I don't like to do things easy. My 15-year-old girls are nature lovers, partly because I'm a crazy birder, but also because, you know, they really realize that without that nature there, we're not going to make it happen. And they're my biggest cheerleaders, and I do what I do because of them and because of all of the children that deserve to have the amazing planet that we have in the right place, in the right state. So I wanted to welcome you all. Thank you for your interest. Huge, huge thanks to Intent for hosting us and for being so generous, enabling us to have this discussion. And open up just with a couple of facts. I mean, many of you know that the financing gap of nature was published in 2020 with the Paulson Institutes and the Nature Conservancy's paper when they said $700 billion. Some people are actually estimating that is $1.5 trillion now, a year, right? To keep nature protected, restored, functioning, so we can survive. We love the tigers and the pandas, but if we really want to keep surviving and having the services that nature is providing to us, we need to put $1.5 trillion on the table. Now, the interesting fact about this is that the money's on the table. You know, we have between 500 billion, depending on the accounting that you have, and Eva Savi would actually slap my wrist if I don't talk about this, but the Business for Nature team just put a report on subsidies that are destroying nature that are on the numbers of $2.6 trillion. $2.6 trillion we are putting on the table. The money is right there, except that it's actually going to practices that are destroying nature. They're not. So we do definitely have to look into a way of reforming those subsidies. Subsidies, as an economist, I can tell you, subsidies are incredibly important for people, yeah? we're not talking about eliminating subsidies necessarily. We're talking about reforming them, using those financial flows so we can get nature protected and restored. And also, I just recently learned, this is a 2024 number, so apologies, that there must be an updated number of this. But according to UNEP Finance Initiative, in 2024, there was $102 billion invested in nature-based solutions. That is 11 times more, 11-fold what it was on the table in 2020, 4 years. So we cannot say that the money's not there. The money's there. So the question that we want to resolve together tonight, and I'm going to stress this, together, tonight is how do we take it to scale? And we are going to break this night in 3 different panels. We're going to let you eat. Don't worry. We will let you eat and have wonderful wine. So the first panel is going to be about corporates. How do we get the private sector to play that role? Whether it is big corporations that are having big footprints in the mining sector, and Stu, thank you so much for being here, or small landholders and farmers, and how do we activate that landscape scale when you are talking about small landholders? And Tanya, thank you so much for being here for us. That panel, I'm going to moderate that, so forgive me for my very scratchy voice, but I just survived the flu, barely. And then Hari is going to take on the second panel that is going to be about solutions that are happening on land that is being owned, whether it is restoration, how are we actually working on those lands that actually are private property. And we're going to close with a panel about indigenous territories and how do we finance indigenous lands. And Hindu's not here yet. Jess is here. Thank you, Jess, for being here. But Hindu promised me that she's going to make it, so hopefully. And we'll close with that. However, I said collaborative. This is not going to be a typical dinner with just panels. You guys are on the hook for this. And I'm going to be coming, and Hari's going to be coming with the microphone, and we're going to get you in between the panels to share your wisdom, to share your experiences, because we want to learn from you, and what we want to end up with from this dinner is not just these wonderful presentations and getting people excited and great food and wine. What we want is collaboration. I want you guys to find each other. I want us to find each other so we can take this to scale as fast as possible, because that's what the planet needs. That's what my children need, to have this planet alive when they are my age. So, with that, does that sound like a plan? No shy people. Okay? And I have a couple of people that I have volunteered to speak so we can start breaking the ice a little bit. But for those of you who want to participate, please feel free. We want to hear from you, okay? All right, so I'm going to get my first people here. So Stu and Tanya, can I ask you guys to join me? And because I have such a scratchy voice, I'm sorry, I'm going to ask these guys to introduce themselves instead of me reading their wonderful bios, so I can save my voice for the questions. Okay.
No.
All right. Tanya, can we start with you on your introduction, and then we'll get Stu, and I'll ask Stu the questions first.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Tanya Havman. I'm the co-founder and director of Clan Mondial. We work with large corporates in funding supply chain actions. That includes working directly with corporates, for example, sourcing soybeans in Iowa, where we're working on financing structures for regenerative agriculture, and also working with companies, mostly traders, that are the important links between large brands in coffee, cocoa, and so forth, and smallholder farmers in emerging markets. And today, we do that in places like Burkina, Benin, Nigeria, Madagascar, Honduras, so lots of places that I'm sure are close to your heart, including with CI's support. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Tanya. Stu?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. My name's Stuart Anstey. I'm very fortunate to be heading up a small group of people that are looking at the role of nature positive within corporates, the Nature Positive Landscape Initiative. It's very, very new. In fact, we published our website on Friday. We're that new. My background has always been in business and biodiversity. I worked for Rio Tinto for over 25 years, where I headed up their business and biodiversity program, biodiversity and ecosystem services, and was very fortunate to be part of the teams that looked in the early 2000s at how companies can better manage biodiversity, and through that developed the net impact on biodiversity policies, the mitigation hierarchy, which I'm very happy to say have now been sort of entrenched in things like the IFC Performance Standard 6 in terms of the environmental management. So I'll try and draw from those two in this discussion today.
Thank you so much for coming, and thanks so much for joining us. Okay, so let's start with Stu. You heard. How many years in Rio Tinto? There's no question that we need very good mining for the transition to renewable energies, right? I mean, absolutely no question about it. And, you know, thinking about technology, same thing. Rare minerals, rare earths, we need to make it happen in the right way. Because we've learned, I mean, we've seen bad mining already. Can we take this opportunity to that where mining is scaling up so quickly to really do it in the right way? So, Stu, tell us a little bit more about nature positive landscapes. And is it really possible with mining?
Well, we certainly hope so. We're working on the premise that there's a societal need for raw materials. And it's certainly with the transition we're doing around climate change. So the idea and what we're trying to do is look at, okay, well then what needs to happen? What level of transformation needs to occur at the operational level so that they're not nature positive themselves, but through their activities both at the site and most importantly within the landscapes that they're working, they're generating positive outcomes for nature that then contribute to that global goal. So the key factors are that, first of all, we need to not throw out what we've done in the past. There's been good work done around the mitigation hierarchy, that's avoid, minimise, restore, and then compensate for their biodiversity impacts. So that's well entrenched. We don't want to throw that away. It's about improving that. And then and this is where the transformation comes in. Having the companies then start to look outside their lease boundaries. Historically, it's been, we work inside our lease, and what happens outside of that, that's not our responsibility. In a lot of the jurisdictions where these companies are working, they're the most significant and most powerful political player, economic player, and social player. So can we turn that? Can we shift that around so that they then start to act as a catalyst to bring multiple stakeholders together within the landscape to identify what are the key drivers of nature loss within that landscape, and then to catalyse programs at that landscape level that are long-lasting and are really working to try and then address those issues, stop them, and then move the curve upwards.
Can we talk a little bit, that's great, thank you. Can we talk a little bit about why mining corporations would be interested or incentivized to engage on this, and what it is required in terms of, is it voluntary action, or are we talking about regulation, or are we talking about value creation or risk mitigation? What are those incentives that are going to help us get them into that space?
I think in answering that, the first thing to recognise is the industry is not uniform. It has major changes as you move through the sector, from the global multinationals at the top right through to the juniors at the bottom, and then the middle guys in the middle. And their drivers and the way they respond to signals are very, very different. So our focus at the moment is on the multinationals, because they're the ones that are very cognizant of maintaining a social licence to operate. And I remember, early days within Rio, I got told by one of the GMs that if one part of Rio sneezes, another part will get the cold. So we're very much drawing on that. But then that won't bring the rest of the industry along. So what we need there is we need really positive signals from investors, financiers, bankers, that this change is necessary and that needs to be backed up by national legislation. So we need all of those levers to be pulled at the same time to get the industry to move in the right direction. If we don't pull all those, and the reality of when we were first doing the biodiversity work in the early 2000s, we had companies like Rio that were really willing to push forward. It was during the first China boom, and everybody was making money hand over fist. So the only way to differentiate between a Rio and a BHP and a Newmont was what you were doing around your social and your environmental performance. So, we were pushing forward in that. But then markets were saying, no, you're leaving value on the table. Because, it's an externality. You don't need to spend that. Your license conditions say you don't need to go down that road. So we were constantly getting pulled back by the market, by shareholders and others pushing forward. So we need to break those bonds, and that'll enable us to keep moving forward.
Yeah, so right after this panel, I'm going to start getting into that question. How do we break those barriers? How do we get the market to really start responding to this? But let's shift from big footprint, big mining companies, big multinationals to farmers and small landholders. And Clare Mondial has been a leader trying to get nature and climate solutions at this level. So, Tanya, can we talk a little bit about why does this matter to the farmers and the challenges of bringing all these little pieces together so you can have landscape impact?
Yeah, we work with smaller farmers that are extremely poor, sometimes illiterate, sometimes in very, very rural areas. And the reality is that, they depend on agriculture for their livelihoods. Oftentimes, they have very insecure livelihoods. So, for example, if you look at the Madagascar vanilla crop, basically what happens is that the government only allows sale of vanilla once or twice a year. And then at that point, basically the farmers get paid. They're not allowed to sell actually vanilla at any other time of the year. But the problem is that means that they only really have income once or twice a year, and then maybe doing some subsistence crops in the meantime. So that really undermines their food security. And what happens is that they actually then tend to forward sell their crop to kind of sort of informal lenders who are not very transparent on their pricing, in exchange to be able to get, for example, rice or food crops. So I think we have to recognize that those commodities play an incredibly important role in actually driving what is happening in the ecosystem, but they're not the only kind of source of income for those smallholder farmers. So our approach has been initially to work through the larger global agricultural corporate value chains, because the agri-food sector, especially in the consumer-facing goods side, is actually relatively concentrated. And then it kind of goes through a series of traders that get more and more localized. So we actually deploy financing through those supply chains and are able to use de-risking from larger corporates in order to actually be able to lend in places like Burkina Faso, which would not otherwise normally be possible, but with the requirement that this money, which is provided on additional terms, comes with additional reporting and sort of obligations. So that is one route, but obviously not all of those farmers are in commodity value chains that are easy to finance. There is a lot of local markets, for example, so we are working on new concepts on things like landscape endowment, which we're working on this year, which will be able to also deploy financing alongside local players in the amounts and in the duration that is really necessary in some of these sourcing landscapes.
So how do you get your investors? How do you convince them that this is a good idea? Especially because, when you're talking about the amount of risk that you're talking about when you're looking at these landscapes that are comprised by these hundreds, in some cases thousands of farmers, the higher the number of the actors, the higher the risk. So what is that special touch that you guys have to convince your investors that this is the right way?
Obviously, financing follows a business case. And when we started developing the first fund, which is the Food Securities Fund, we were talking to a lot of banks, insurance companies, pension funds. And what we heard from them was that the microfinance sector had been very successful, also because the liquidity of the portfolio. So it's not just about risk return, it's also about liquidity. And investors were willing to maybe not have such a high return expectation if they were able to have liquidity, at least on a quarterly basis. And then we were looking at the supply chains and we're saying, actually, like there is a huge need for working capital financing. It's just not happening in those supply chains. And there's a huge a barrier to actually transitioning, because if you don't have the money at the right time in agriculture, basically you can forget about it for the next sort of 6 to 12 months. So we basically use the value chain to de-risk, and then we are also fortunate to work with the DFC. We still have an excellent relationship with them, and they provided an unfunded first loss guarantee, second tier loss guarantee, which we actually pay for. So they actually made good money on that, because we only called it once and then we completely refunded them. And then we worked with CI to unlock the Global Environment Facility, but on commercial terms. So actually the only non-public sector investors that we have is the GEF. Everyone else is private. And, it's been great. Liquidity has been there. The performance has been there. And we're looking at how to build on this relationship. But I think ultimately, you have to put the product into something that investors recognize and feel comfortable about, and have good corporate governance, and have solid sort of service providers that people recognize, and partners like CI.
Thank you. No, we love to be your partner, and we are a Jeff agency. And the reason why I was reaching out to my phone is because Orisa Samaru, who is part of my team, is right now in Bonn. I was in Bonn on Sunday at the kickoff of the replenishment negotiation of the Global Environment Facility of the GEF. So for those of you who don't work with the GEF is one of the biggest donors to nature, to biodiversity, to the conventions. And they are just in the process of negotiating the 9th replenishment right now. You may not know that the 8th replenishment was $5.3 billion for 4 years. There's no way that we're going to get to that number right now. So we're hoping that we will get beyond the $3 billion. But I just wanted to read this from Marisa, who just sent this to me literally half an hour ago. She said, the 3rd replenishment meeting of the GEF 9 is wrapping up in Bonn. They've been locked up negotiating yesterday and today. It has been a tough few days. Donor countries have very strong positions on what they would fund or not. Overall, there was resounding support for increasing the blended finance window, even if it meant slightly reducing the funding for SIDS, so island states, or the small grants program that goes to very little conservation or climate organizations, and a big reduction on climate change complements of the US government. We don't have a final replenishment amount yet. That will happen in April. But I just wanted to read this to you because the financing environment is changing. That public funding that was, in some cases, a huge anchor for a lot of the interventions that we're trying to do may no longer be there, or not as big as it used to be. So we need to get creative. We need to start thinking outside the box and how do we go beyond that public funding so we can actually get, like your example happening.
Maybe just to add on that, I mean, the reason that it worked for us is also that actually the corporates provide the first loss on the transactions that are in the supply chain, but only partial first loss. And they do that because they actually care about the resilience of that supply chain. And we're seeing more and more corporates, including some of the global brands that you all love and I'm sure consume on a regular basis, have done climate risk assessments and have realized that if they're not supporting corporates, smaller farmers in these areas, they're going to be affected, like what happened with Hershey last year on the cocoa price. So I think that is an opportunity. And even in the transaction in the US, I mean, a large global corporate is thinking about coming in with first loss capital alongside a foundation to unlock bank financing. And this is unique, and we think it's an opportunity.
And it's definitely something that we have to scale up. I mean, Hari is
We need to start eating, otherwise we're never going to get through the meal.
Okay, well...
Can I just add one thing to stimulate conversation here, which is I think that's a great segue in terms of the GEF typically funds a lot of what we conventionally think of as nature protection, which is the public lands piece. Stu and I were talking earlier just about the scale of opportunity with the private sector and corporates. So Stu, can you just share the example that you gave to me just in the mining sector with one company and the scale of opportunity here and how to engage the private sector? And then I'd love the conversations at the table to continue in that vein around how we can be more creative.
Yeah, the scale is actually significant. I can't give you sort of current numbers, but I can sort of relay past numbers when we were developing the biodiversity work in the beginning years. One of the things that really influenced our thinking in terms of what we could do was the size of the land holding. Now, I'm speaking about one organisation here. At the time, and this is early 2000s, so Rio is a very different organisation now, we were talking in terms of total land holding of about 72 to 75,000 square kilometres. So we're talking country size. And the important thing to consider there, and this is still true, within the extractive industry, only a small proportion of that land is used for the purposes of mining and refining, around 7 to 10% of that. Most of that other land is held as buffer. With some companies, they then take a viewpoint that they need to manage land on a strategic basis that is not associated with that mining. So, for instance, in the Pilbara of Western Australia, all of the players in the Pilbara of Western Australia, so the northwest of Western Australia, a huge iron ore province, all of the big players, BHP, Fortescue, Rio, all own and manage pastoral stations to gain access to land. It's the same in the US, in Nevada. You've got Anglo or Newmont countries there. You know, they own pastoral stations. They manage those. The key thing with those is that most of them are passively managed. So they basically just hold them. In some situations, like Madagascar, for instance, they provide real opportunity for conservation in terms of the governance structures that go around there, so avoiding loss that's going on, or restoration work. So, you know, a number of companies right at the moment are doing restoration work as part of their sort of portfolios in Brazil. So there's some significant opportunities in terms of looking at partnering with those agencies and organisations to generate scale, and this is the whole premise of our sort of work around nature positive landscapes, is to use those as the anchor point to then do the broader piece and then bring in funding sources from elsewhere to complement that work that's already been done at a local level.
And engage those communities that are there so they can be the stewards of those lands. All right, we're going to let you eat, but remember, this is collaborative. You have homework. You got to talk in your tables. Or at your tables in proper English, and we'll be coming with the microphone, Hari and I. Thank you so much, Stu and Tanya. Really appreciate your contributions. Thanks.
that argument doesn't win the day for most people.
Next panel, I'll be moderating.
No, I am. I run my domain. You have a piece of
Very good. You're welcome.
Hi.
2-3 minutes. Yeah. Or even 30 seconds, whatever you
Sure. I'm Paula. I live in Toronto. I work at the World Bank. RBC, Royal Bank of Canada. But I work more with our large clients, support family, and the kind of impact they don't have.
Hello everyone, my name is Heidi. I don't usually have a strong voice, so I'll try my best to speak loud. I'm coming from Norway and based in Norway, in Oslo. I'm co-founder of a global nuclear power institute. My experience is environmental chemistry. And what I love is the topics of nature related to forest, restoration, and ocean. And now I'm working on establishing regulation that is Sorry?
What is the foundation?
For now in Norway, starting in Norway, we're in an early stage.
Oh, the foundation.
Yes, yes, yes. Dedicated to the deep, essentially. It's a new one, yes. I've been working for the past 3 years with the topic of deep sea because of deep mining, but also emerging phenomenon. Based on that work, we decided to also create an innovation
I do not know who I am. Well, I've spoken to her, so go ahead.
Oh, wait, a lot of us arrived later.
Oh, okay. All right. Sorry. So I'm Patricia Zurrita. I work for Conserve International. I'm the Chief Partnership Officer. And we've been pushing for nature.
My name is Nelson.
Okay. I'm super sorry to interrupt. I know I sent you homework. But I also want to get some of the people from the floor. Okay. I'm going to try one more time.
Let's bring it back. There we go.
Thank you. I know I sent you homework, and now I'm interrupting the homework. I'm really, really sorry, but we want to make sure that we also hear the voices from some of the people who have been working on some of the topics that we were talking about. So apologies for this, because this is also going to spark additional conversation. So you heard me saying that there's, $2.6 trillion on subsidies that are destroying nature. So I wanted to bring Ewan from the B team to share a little bit of the experience, and I don't know where you are. There you are. Sorry. Can share with us why the B team is working on this.
Just tell me what you want.
Thanks, Patricia. When you asked me to speak, I started scribbling down some notes, and then in your opening remarks, you stole them all. So I'm not sure I actually have a huge amount to add. But yeah, as you've identified, so the scale of the gap in nature finance, 1.5 trillion, and the number that the B team in conjunction with Business for Nature has come to in terms of the amount that governments spend on environmentally harmful subsidies each year is 2.6 trillion. That, by the way, is a conservative estimate. Even the World Bank have projected that number is much higher. So if you think about it, even a modest portion of that money redirected towards nature finance could make a huge amount of progress towards the goal that we're trying to achieve. I don't want to pretend that sort of redirection is easy. Lots of governments that have sought to reform subsidy regimes have done so and failed. Some of them have failed so badly that they've ended up being kicked out of office. So it's politically very difficult to do. That's why the B team is working on this. The B team is a coalition of business leaders. We think that if business gets behind government in their attempts to reform subsidies, that helps give them the backing and the support that they need to make it happen. Not only that, but businesses can come to the table with constructive ideas around what good reforms would look like as well. So that's why we're in this space. Obviously delighted to be working with CI on this as well. And maybe just an open offer to everyone else, in the room tonight, if you'd like to explore working with us on this issue, be more than delighted.
Thank you so much. And I'm sorry for stealing your numbers, but it's your numbers, actually. So one thing that I want you guys to keep in mind is that when we're talking about subsidy reform, it's not about only the politicians that have to make the decisions. Yes, of course, we need them to make the decisions, but the business sector has an incredibly important role getting started, showing that it's actually possible, that the farmers want to change, that the fishermen want to change, that the productive sector wants to change, and that there are really, really very strong possibilities of reforming these subsidies so they become incentives for whether it is regenerative agriculture or sustainable fisheries or really good restoration systems that are bringing nature back. So, Ian, thank you so much, and thank you to the B team and to Leah and to all of you guys for doing what you are doing. So, subsidy reform, not only policy, it's also the private sector. So, get talking about that. And before I pass it on, I want to bring Isabel Hoffman. One of the most traditional ways of financing nature has been carbon. This has been kind of like the go-to. And the number, that 102 billion that I mentioned, a lot of that is nature-based solutions for climate. So, Izzy, I wanted to ask you from your perspective, how do you see it? Is it actually working?
Well, that's a good question. So what's clear is that there is a demand for high-quality carbon removal credits. That's already very many specificities adjusted to that. Like there are low quality ones and there are other forms of carbon credits. Here we're talking specifically about nature restoration and paying for that through the creation of carbon credits. And you mentioned the number earlier as well, taking my numbers in your introduction, but only looking at forest restoration, the market doubled in 2025. We got $1.2 billion commitment into carbon removals only for reforestation. That's great, but we do need 10, and that equals to 50 megatons of carbon removed. If we actually want to achieve net zero, we need to be getting to 10 gigatons per year by 2030. So there's a lot more to do. I'm here to tell you that there is demand. There are people buying this stuff, not fast enough and not for long enough periods of time. We need forward commitments over multiple years in order to get this market moving, in order to start investing in reforesting land, because we're going to have a supply constraint by 2030 unless these commitments are coming now and unless this money is getting into this land now, basically.
Thank you so much for that, EC. Okay. You're back to your homework, although, no, actually, Hari is actually bringing the other panel. Apologies. You're like, I'm not following the script. What's wrong with me? So thank you, guys. Thank you, EC. Thank you, Ewan. And we're moving into the second panel.
James, Satya, please. So we spent the first part of this session, the first act was really around the private sector. And we heard about the private sector's role in both land management as well as subsidy reform. Now we're going to move to another large contingent of land holders, which is private landholders. We're going to be tight on time here, so I'm warning you both now. The team has told me that the next course is hot, and if we take too long, it won't be hot anymore. So, we're also talking about collective action, right? So I want to start with you, Satya. You have a beautiful story about the evolution of soil forest and the hummingbird, which really responds to this collective action notion. So please start with your hummingbird story and tell us a little bit about what you're doing at Soil Forest
And in how much time?
In 5 minutes.
All right, thank you, Hari. Thanks, Patricia, and everybody. Considering the vast amount of wisdom in this room, I am learning a lot more than what I'm offering. Thank you. I'm sure all of us heard this hummingbird story at some point of time where there's a forest on fire, there is a hummingbird, all other animals are just sitting and chilling and having wine. There is a hummingbird which just came, picked up water and started pouring on that, and all the rest of the animals were laughing even more. For about 10 years, this is the story I believed was a story of hope. Last 2 years, I actually started thinking about it. It's stupidity. It's a story. First of all, in the first place, hummingbird should not be doing that. It is not the job of hummingbird. There should have been systems. We know hummingbird is going to fail. There should have been systems to prevent that fire. We should be celebrating something a lot more fundamental, something a lot more boring, and not a story of a hero. The reason why all this comes back to the story of Soil Forest is a lot of nature-related initiatives look at the doers as heroes. One of the things that I started feeling more and more in the last 2.5 years is nature requires such reliable, dependable, boring infrastructure that we don't even know it exists, but it actually should be doing its work. Then you don't celebrate hummingbird as a star, but you start looking at what are the preconditions for fires not to happen. At Soil Forest, we build nature economic zones. We started about 3 years ago. Prior to that, for about 10 years, I was in climate smart farming, making greenhouses for smallholder farmers. And we continue to do that. And Soil Forest focuses on building these nature economic zones, which look at non-carbon credit-based ways to build business revenues, diversified revenues for large-scale restoration. We are doing 2 nature economic zones in India in the last 3 years. I don't want to claim that we are close to perfect, but what I have still done is to share our learnings. I presented everybody a copy of the report, what we are attempting to do, and what we have been doing in the past 30 months. Please do look at it. And we are looking at nature as the long-term infrastructure and economic activities like nature-based living, nature-based wellness, and a lot more. In fact, when people talk about data centers, one of the conversations we began in India is around why can't around every data center, why are we not having 20x, 30x of that space as nature space, and many more things like that. So yes, the idea is to build more diversified cash flow streams to make restoration investable and boring.
That does deserve applause. So the hummingbird stories is, I really appreciate that story because it talks about the translation from hero to everybody, right? Everybody needs to be engaged. James, you're a self-described red-blooded capitalist, and we talk a lot about how in order to save nature, we need to make it investable. We need to make the cash flows work. And you work with some large landholders. Tell us the story around how you think about nature-positive cash flows in large landscapes.
Yes, I think I've been sat here to look bad, but I'm not quite as poetic. But nevertheless, I wanted to echo something that Patricia said, is that incentives work, and that without incentives, you're never going to be able to scale any of this. So, however well-intentioned. And perhaps this is a story of incentives working. I work with some US family offices. We're investing in Australian rangelands, which is pastoral grazing. This is sort of classic red dirt, low rainfall, but where the return kicker comes from is carbon. So more than half the value uptick comes from carbon. So we are right in the middle of buying 1 million acres, which sounds big in Australia. It's not that big. About 22% of that is a carbon project. We're going to pull off about $70 million of carbon out of that. And, frankly, one of the investors keeps saying, well, this is bullshit, quote unquote. But the bullshit, nevertheless, is translating into investment, right? So we are basically removing grazing pressure, removing feral animals, rotational grazing, lots of things which the regen ag community are pretty familiar with. Australia has a pretty robust system for producing Australian carbon credits. They're bringing in new legislation for the IFLM, which allows stacking of different credits. So this is something which is floating boats, investors' boats, who would otherwise not, they would certainly not be at a dinner like this.
Thanks for that, James. So we're starting to see the connection here, right? We heard the story from Stu about nature-positive landscapes, how it's applicable to the private sector and large corporations. The same story is true for individual landholders that are interested in the bottom line, right? And the cash flows actually work. So we have 3 minutes, but can you describe just a little bit more from both of your perspectives, a minute each, just on what those cash flows actually look like and what the return profiles look like for investors?
I think conservatively, we reckon we get at least a 20% IRR out of this project, and that's why these guys are interested.
Our business is boring, right? So the prerequisite is we take capital only from those who look at decades, not quarters. So that's the first criteria. The minimum is 10 years. And over a 10-year period, 12 to 15% is the kind of cash flow IRR what we look at. Wish I could say 20%, but I don't think that's a good promise to make. But right now we are around 12 to 15%.
Fantastic. So we're seeing now that the economics work. So Izzy talked a little bit about the carbon markets. As we think about these stacked income streams, we can start to see some return profiles that are highly attractive to investors as well. So as dinner is coming out, I just wanted to express something else. We at the NAT and at my firm EcoAdvisors have been getting a considerable amount of interest from private landholders around how to generate nature-positive income streams. As dinner is coming out, I wanted to ask Faye, from your perspective, you're doing some amazing work in Malaysia. Can you share a little bit about your story and the inspiration around what you're doing and why you're doing it?
Hi everyone, my name is Faye. So I'm second generation and my family owns land in Malaysia. One of the land that we own is 3,000 acres of rainforest in Malaysia. It's 45 minutes from Kuala Lumpur, 30 minutes from an international airport. It is at risk for deforestation. There's a lot of sand mining on it, and there is always a threat to somebody saying, can I put a data center on top? Don't worry, I'll put solar on the roofs. It's fine. It'll be completely green. And you say, oh, really? Honestly? And a couple of years ago, I decided to tell everybody to bugger off and actually say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to turn this into an investable asset. And this will be the family legacy. So we want to show people that nature is the asset if you're not being extractive, but you have to be additive. And we are looking at, say, out of call it 1,100 hectares, we are only going to build on what has been mined. So, for example, that would be about less than 100 hectares. Hotels, and I'll tell you about hotels because it's really cool what we're trying to do. And the 10% is actually going to support economically the 90%, everything from conservation of the endangered species that we have on the land to security and rewilding and restoration. On that site, I could effectively rewild the whole 100% and just sit on carbon credits and biodiversity credits, and I decided I'm not going to because there's a better way of doing this. There's a better way to change people's hearts and minds if I use this land as a canvas right now to show people a better way of living, a positive way of living, a positive way for industry. What can we do with that site now? It's fun. And then we can actually get people who look at this and go like, oh my goodness, I would love to do part of this. I want to repeat this. And now we can do this across the world. And that is my intention for this site. So I've got a really amazing set of partners that are looking at it from bottom up. You know, we're using, for example, teenage kids as a muse. Can I gamify that site? Because they're used to Apple and Netflix and everything else. How about Pokemon? Can we actually talk to people about, you know, coming in, blending the digital world to the physical world and making them go, wow, this is Jurassic Park. I want to come in here. I want to see the power of nature. I want to see the beauty of nature. It's going to make me cry. It's going to make me laugh. But it's going to make me remember. And if I do that, then I'm changing hearts and minds. And if I change hearts and minds, I'm changing the system. That's what I'm trying to do.
Thank you, Satya and James. I'm going to ask Credence here to talk a little bit about family businesses and family offices and the role that they actually play in igniting this change. You guys can go back to your seats so you can get your food.
Thank you. I'm actually going to switch it up a little in terms of the topic there. Yes, it's pertaining to our family office and what we ended up getting involved with, which is sustainable regenerative forestry in Nicaragua. How we got involved with that was kind of a mistake, long story, not for tonight. But we ended up working with local partners to start bringing it was teak, or it is teak really, the majority of what we've got there, to the international market. And brought a lot of value add to it and what we were invested in. It ultimately, though, after having added a lot of value into it, we started looking for ways to get a little bit of liquidity out of it, and we started realizing, well, this is kind of not the most liquid space to be in. And we'd been working with some global partners there, and we realized that there were a lot of other people throughout the region in Central America. This doesn't have to be limited to Central America, it just happens to be right now. So we realized that within our network, there were other mills, there were other plantations and forestry businesses in Panama, in Costa Rica, and otherwise that had also done significant value adds. And after putting a lot in, they were also realizing they weren't very liquid either. So we decided through our UK-based partner who does our global distribution that we would start structuring a roll-up of all of these. So what we're putting together right now, and this is actually interesting because, one, it's how we can bring people together, but it also, when Jessica invited me here, I read in the description, it was talking about about having identified a lot of boutique projects that people were invested in, and now needing to bring that to scale for the institutions would want to be involved in. And that's exactly what we've actually started to do. So, long story short, we now have several partners coming together in this roll-up. We just had one of the largest university endowment funds in the world also come on board with us. I can't say which university that is. I have an NDA that prohibits me from using their name, but it is one of the largest in the world. And they just committed another 1 million trees to the project. And right now, our total resource value, the long-term value on the resource, 10 years out, is 2.64 billion, sort of rhymes with your 2.6 trillion. And we, in this roll-up, we are looking for equity partners. We're bringing in, we're offering up 100 million, 50% for 100 million. As I said, that is a $2.64 billion 10-year value on there, of which about 700 million is free cash flow, which is more what you might want to put the valuation based on. But it's, when you talk about looking for a return for investors and the economic value add to them, the first thing is, of course, the cash flows. We've got 18 million in pending orders right now. And also, the next thing is, because all of these were motivated sellers, everyone's taking at least a 30 to 70% discount, depending on who it is, on this. Overall, the opportunity is significantly discounted. We're looking at marking this to market for easily a 300% reval in the next few years. So that would be immediate upside to anybody coming in on this project. So in one regard, if people are actually looking at investing in a broad scale in something that is bringing together various sustainable forestry efforts, this is an excellent vehicle. The vehicle we're using is UK-based. It is a UK-domiciled vehicle. And also, if you have other forestry projects and you're looking for something where you can participate in it and potentially realize some liquidity as well, we're happy to bring you into the roll-up as partners in that too.
Thank you for sharing so much, and thank you for deviating from the script. Okay, food is still coming, and there's one more person that I want to bring to the table, and Espen, I don't know where you are. I wanted to go back to the planting trees, and a partnership that we created, or that we were actually brought into by BTG Pactual in Brazil. I came back to CI, as I told you, 2.5 years ago. Very conservation heart, yeah? And I learned about this partnership that CI has with BTG, where we are actually in the Cerrado of Brazil that has lost almost 90% of the native vegetation. We are planting timber that is for sale, including eucalyptus. And I was like, what the? Really? Why are we doing that with BTG? And their commitment is to protect, and where are you, Spen? I'm sorry. I don't want to steal numbers or your thunder. So why don't you tell the story instead of me? Sorry.
Yeah, thanks. No, we are really proud about our collaboration with Conservation International. And the story is some 5 years ago, we saw that we saw the challenge with there's more than a million or 100 million hectares of degraded cattle pastures in South America. Most of it sits now in idle cattle farms, and we saw this is an amazing opportunity to address climate and also try to help about the nature crisis. So we started developing a strategy, and if we need to restore a large portion of the 100 million, we need something that can go to scale. So we thought, okay, how can we make a strategy that can go to scale? And to go to scale, we need to get to the large asset allocators, the pension funds, the sovereigns, and they are real asset investors. So we try to develop a real asset strategy, but important for that, to convince them that they should do a strategy that was kind of new, that wasn't the same as they'd done before. We started collaborating with Conservation International to get the impact credential right, to make sure that we could both develop something that had a meaningful impact on climate and nature. So we started doing that, and we said, okay, let's set a bold target, $1 billion for nature restoration and reforestation. That's 5 years ago, and this is, of course, not official. You heard it here first, but we actually think that we should surpass that target by the end of next month, where we do our final close with... thank you. And I think bringing this to scale, I think the learning is we really need NGO partners so that everybody can feel confident that we actually can bring both the financial returns as well as the nature impact and the climate impact. And that has been really crucial in the communications we've had with all of those different investors. So thank you again.
Thank you so much for sharing. And yes, I mean, look, this was one of those type of partnerships that got CI outside of our comfort zone. And I came 2 years and a half ago, and I said, what the hell are we doing? Eucalyptus? Are you kidding me? No, this is actually making it financially possible so we can actually restore. So 50% of the land that BTG has under plantation is native forest. We wouldn't have been able to recover 50% of that land with any philanthropic capital, ever. So here we are with a commercially viable, exceeding the 1 billion capital that they were aspiring for, by having 50% of the land in native forest and 50% in commercial timber. So this is thinking outside the box, thinking about creative solutions, and partnering, building those partnerships of trust that can really make the impossible happen. So with that, enjoy your second course, and thank you so much.
And before we get back to conversation, the point here is that when we talk about the $700 billion to $1.5 trillion problem, it's easy to throw our hands up in the air and say there's nothing we can do. When Patricia and I first met 20 years ago, we were doing small-scale projects in the tens of millions of dollar range. We just heard examples here crossing $1 billion, $2.6 billion. And to Patricia's point earlier, we've scaled nature finance from 11x over the last 6 years. We need to do that again over the next 4 years. So your homework in this part of the conversation is to take the next step. So how do we get more creative? How do we have more collaboration? And how do we go from the $2.6 billion examples to the $25 billion examples?
Have my
vibes is kind of what we're
So I'm really sorry to interrupt again. I'm going to need another glass. Can you? Sorry. I know, it's super interesting conversation, and I feel so bad. I feel so bad of interrupting this wonderful conversation, but we have to respect the time, and Intent has been so wonderful to us that I don't want them to be working overtime because of us. Hindu, this is you. Okay, it's my incredible honor and pleasure to be moderating this last panel with my wonderful sister, soul sister really, Hindu Ibrahim, an indigenous person from Chad. She happens to be also a board member of CI, but she is an absolutely force for nature, not only in terms of the indigenous movement, but in terms of real nature. She is extraordinary. I am so honored that you were able to be here, Hindu, seriously, because I know how much people want to have you in all of these different panels, not only because of how wonderful you are and how charismatic you are, but because you are so wise. So thank you so much for making the time and for not eating in the previous dinner and coming and just shoving her food right in so she could actually eat right now. But we also have Jess Smith here. And Jess, I should actually let you introduce yourself, but just to say, Jess is coming from the academic side of the indigenous peoples conversation and really understanding and writing her thesis on how to finance indigenous lands. So for those of you who don't know, I'm sure that everybody knows here, but for those of you who don't know, if we want to achieve the 30 by 30 goal that the Global Biodiversity Framework and the governments agreed in the Global Biodiversity Framework, we have to work with indigenous peoples. Indigenous peoples have been the stewards, the carers, the protectors of incredibly important pieces of land that are incredibly important for nature and carbon. Without them, there's no planetary solution. Flat out, period. And if we don't empower them, if we don't work with them, if we don't let their wisdom help us find solutions, we're not going to be able to make it happen. So this is why we wanted to end with this panel, because it doesn't matter how much we have, all of the finances of the world, if we don't put it in the right hands, we cannot make it work. So we're going to address this question from the indigenous perspective, having Hindu as an indigenous leader in Chad, but also from the academic side. And what you're finding in your studies. And we're going to talk about 2 different questions, and I know that we don't have a lot of time. So first question is, what are the trends that you're seeing? I mean, we had the announcement, for those of you who were in Belém, the announcement of the TFFF and how a big percentage of that is actually going to go to the hands of indigenous peoples. Or for those of you who were in Cali when we were in the Biodiversity COP and the Cali Fund, and how that is actually technically going to the hands of indigenous peoples. So there are trends that we are seeing, but Hindu, from your community, the people from your community, are they seeing these trends? How do you see it? I mean, and you have the huge advantage of straddling these 2 different worlds, these global pledges and the discussions that are happening in the political system, and also your community on the ground.
Thank you very much, sister. I'm just laughing like if I'm seeing the money. I think I'm starting to just to pull my head and then pass through table and table. Then I go back home and say like, now you have the money, because there is not. So, as she said, I cannot start my talk without telling you that indigenous peoples are the nature. We are part of the nature. We are stewardship of the nature. We protect the nature with our blood. And you know that, because people are getting killed just because they're protecting their own land. Every single day, in my community, in my people, is the same. Even 2 days ago in Cameroon, they killed babies and women just to get the land. So, to protect it. We're protecting it not to get a salary at the end of the month. We are protecting it for the future generation. And when I say future generation, don't take me wrong. We are talking about the 7 upcoming generation, not 2030, not 2050, all the generations that are coming. But we are doing that since centuries. No one is paying for that. And at the end of the day, we are seeing all the money is going on the destructions of the nature. And I'm sure that you talked about it in the previous panel, how much billions are going to the nature destructions. Less than 1% is going to the indigenous peoples. She can give the proof later. But less than 1%, that's what we found as indigenous peoples. How you can pay your best players if like you have a football team, you have Messi that is playing, you do not pay him a salary, and you expect him to put a goal. It's not possible. You cannot, without paying your best player, and is thinking about having the best football team. All the best football team are well paid. So indigenous peoples are the best players to keep the nature, to protect the nature, but they are not paid on what they are doing. They are even harmed on what they are doing. So we are your Messi. We are your Ronaldo. So we have to get paid, and we deserve this payment. Now, is the money come to my communities? No. I fight it. I put a principles and guideline on how businesses, private sectors, multilateral can work with indigenous peoples. Because they all give the excuse, oh, you cannot manage the money. We can give you 5,000, 20,000. You cannot manage the money. I put that out, how we can work with us. If we can protect 80% of the world's biodiversity, of course we can manage your billion of money. Maybe the way that we do that is not the same. Maybe my grandmother didn't went to school. She cannot fill you the Excel sheet, but she knows how to grow the tree. She knows how to protect her water. She knows how to feed her family. but she is not getting this money because we do not have the same perspective. So this money didn't win. At the COP30, we have the commitment of 20% of the tropical forest forever facility that can go to the indigenous peoples. We get the commitment of direct access finance for 1.8 billion. Now we wanted to see where is the trust to give the money to the community, to give to my grandmother who cannot fill the Excel sheet, but who can protect the environment better than a banker or than a CEO who can make the number because she can make the impact that can help all of us to live together. That is where we are right now. So pay your best football players if you wanted to protect the nature.
I think I'm going to start calling you Messi. Okay, Jess. Tell us, why did you start studying this? What have you found? And what are the challenges and what are the opportunities? I mean, leave us with a little bit of hope here.
Great, thank you. And thank you so much for having me. And I mentioned earlier to Patricia and Hari, actually I opened my PhD proposal with a quote from Hindu with the rationale for why I was doing the research. So it's really an honor to be on the panel with you. So first of all, 22 years ago, I actually had the great honor. I currently work for the UN Environment Program, the Finance Initiative. I worked then for the UNDP Global Environment Facility Small Grants Facility, so which Patricia was speaking about earlier, is currently fighting for its life in negotiations. And I have to say, frankly, it's one of the very best programs that exists across the multilateral universe because it gives money directly to communities and small organizations to lead on biodiversity management, to combat climate change, and to develop circular solutions. And I had a great opportunity, first of all, based in Namibia, to work in the 12 different regions, which have very vastly different ecosystems and cultures, to see how communities were leading on these environmental topics. And I kept going. In Namibia, I had the chance to work in, I lived in 4 different Southern African countries, and I worked all across the continent on increasingly larger and larger projects. And the further up the money chain you got, the further you were actually for reaching communities. So there was really a scaling problem where there were actually great solutions and great enterprises at the community level, but they were not connecting into finance. So around 13 years ago, I started working with the banking community, and now I work with banks, insurers, investors. But I have continued to circle around this question of how do we connect the finance that, as Hindu, brilliantly described, is deserved by the nature stewards. Multiple studies in different parts of the world, in different bioregions, with different lenses, different methods, show that indigenous communities are better managing biodiversity than even state-protected areas that are set up for that purpose. So that is the undervalued, underpaid, unseen Messi. So this is a huge market failure. So in my research, I do see there are unfair perceived risks. I think there are failures in de-risking methods. We also do need methods like insurance and guarantees, but we also just need to trust our best players. So there's a lot more that could be done. So my research is around what is the real gap, what is the perceived gap, and then also the onus is not only on indigenous communities who are doing the work already to pitch it and sell it, it's also about getting the financial sector to move forward to meet where the nature stewards are and listen to them in terms of what they need, because we are building all of our other enterprises off this infrastructure that they are managing for us.
Thank you so much, Jess. And it is a matter of trust, and it's a matter of really believing that this is part of the solution, and it's about learning. And and I'm going to tell you something. I haven't told you this yet. So I told you I grew up in Ecuador, right? I grew up in Quito. In a family who had the privilege of having, farms, and we lived in the city, but, we had working farms around the city. And my grandmother had indigenous peoples from the Andes. Ecuador is more than 40% of the people are indigenous from different nationalities, whether it is in the mountains or the coast or in the Amazon. And my grandmother was always incredibly mistrusting of indigenous people who worked in our house or in the farms. And I grew up in that system. And it was not until I went to university and I had the immense privilege of working with Quechuas, Sionas, and Sequoias in the northern Amazon of Ecuador, where kind of like a completely different world came to me and said, oh my Lord, these people really know what they're talking about. They know so much more than I do after 4 years of university and environmental sciences. They know the forest, they know how to manage it. It was like, why are we not working with them? And that was right at the time when the Ecuadorian government and the constitution recognized our multiple nationalities, our multiple languages. And now, you know, Ecuador is one of the countries that have been leading the conversation about how indigenous peoples have to manage their territories. But it is an element of trust and is an element of education. If I grew up in a family that was, you know, educated, I mean, I was not necessarily super privileged, but, you know, I'm working middle class and I was exposed to those prejudices all the time. How are we actually shifting this in the financial world? How are we getting the financial world to trust these communities as the right and the wisest stewards of these resources that are going to be providing for us in the long run? So I'm looking at Hari. Yeah, so thank you guys for being here. Thank you for leaving us with this piece of the solution that is so overseen. When we're talking about financial markets and financial solutions for nature, we don't talk about indigenous peoples. We don't talk about how do we partner with the messes of the solution. So thank you for making the time, and thank you for being here and for fighting for this. We are very proud at CI of having an indigenous peoples and local community center led by an indigenous Amazonian Brazilian guy, Francisco Souza. And it is something that we have always, from the very beginning, believed in. We work conserving and protecting and restoring nature for the benefit of people, for the benefit of local people. So for all of you, thank you for making the time. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing all your wisdom with us. And dessert's coming. Don't go.
I know. I walk from Gold House to come here, right? I miss my dinner. Time is important, but we are in Davos here. So everyone understand from time. I'm going to make one more. Okay, thank you. Yeah, sorry, and this also like how we negotiate. As indigenous peoples, we have to impose ourselves, otherwise no one can give us the place. So, one thing that I wanted to leave you with. Indigenous peoples have a knowledge. Maybe they are not the same as the peoples that went to school. We need to bridge the knowledge together, and I did that, and it's work. I use the science knowledge, technology, and indigenous knowledge. I built a map. People who didn't went to school, like my grandmother, they are protecting their land now. Over 3,000 kilometers square. I don't know how many millions hectares, they're protecting it because we bridge the knowledge. So share your knowledge, bridge it. Build the trust. Put your dollars in what is matter for your future, for the future generation. You can get your income for 10 years. Maybe you can have multi-millions for 10 years. If the nature is not protected, you cannot buy anything with your money. If the food is not healthy, you can spend all your money in the hospital, you cannot be healthy. If the air is not clean, you cannot be sure about the babies that are growing. So think about long term. Vote for right peoples. Invest your money for yourself and put it in indigenous people's hand. We can manage this money. Just to trust. We want to have trust. Give the money, you will see the future in your eyes, and we wanted to have the future all together. Please, please leave Davos with the wisdom of investment, because your money is investing on indigenous peoples. It's not lost. Thank you for the time.
So as we move into dessert, I mean, always powerful words from Hindu. Thank you so much, Hindu, and thanks for challenging me on the time issue. I just want to, there's a little bit of subversive aspects here as well. So one question we often get asked at our events and when we built the NAT is how do you engage? I hate to break it to you, but now you're part of the family. So we built the NAT to be the collection of agency around getting to nature positive, addressing the financing gap, building the community. So now you're all part of the community. This isn't just an evening, this isn't just a dinner, this isn't just nice wine and good conversation. This is a journey that we all have to go on together. Before we get into dessert, I just wanted to ask Tobias. So we have staged events kind of throughout. We have the Goals House dinner that Hindu is in. We have roundtables targeting specific aspects of converting to nature positive. We're supporting the nature lunch, which Tobias will talk about a little bit on Thursday. And it's not just in Davos. It continues on, and the journey continues on. So, like I said, you're all part of the family. We're going to hold you accountable. Tobias, can you share a few words about the nature lunch and what you're trying to accomplish and how this story continues?
Thanks, Hari. And yes, of course, I'm happy to do that. The story continues. Tomorrow, Trump is going to arrive, but we have a nature lunch on Thursday, and we have great people there. And I think many of you, or some of you, also registered to be part of that. Let me give a little bit of context. 2 years ago, we started building an action platform called the European Biodiversity Coalition. What we wanted to do is convening change makers from the corporate world, the CSOs, the biodiversity experts, bringing them together with the intention to make nature a smart business move. Work together and think about what is it that corporates can do together. Thanks for that. So for the past 2 years, we've been bringing together those corporate change makers every 2 months, actually in person, always 20, 30 people, from about 50 European companies, from Airbus to Nestlé, from BNP Paribas to Volkswagen and Siemens, and lots of big brands. And now that this community is building, and the understanding is that we need to find collaborative action on nature. We need to find solutions together. We are also now partnering with great organizations to have an event here in Davos. And we have Barbara from Innovate for Nature, who's one of our partners. We have Corbinian, I think, in the room from the Nature Wealth Foundation. And all together, we are hosting this event. Andre Hoffmann has confirmed to be on the panel, Paul Polman, Johan Rockström, Kirsten Schöd from the WWF, and 2 CEOs. And we hope to continue some of the discussions that we were having tonight. There will be lunch sessions on finance, on coffee, on ocean, on different topics. So this starts this year. It's the inaugural Nature Lunch. If you're not there anymore, or if you think that Davos is now discussing Trump's topics, I hope you don't, then we will continue next year. So thanks for that, Hari. It's been great to also exchange ideas and start working together on this. So let's continue. Thanks.
Okay, happy dessert, everybody. Enjoy your dessert. And thank you so much for coming. Is there anything else? No? Okay.
I'm the world's worst